And we are live. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. It is Christmas Day, December the 25th, 2020. I am lucky to be joined by Rebecca Narr from My Relo Solution. Rebecca, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Josh, for having me and everybody on the call. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Absolutely, and thanks for everybody who is tuning in on this holiday day. We were thinking about having the show or not, and I said, "What the heck? We'll have a useful conversation. If people want to show up, great. Those of you who are tuning in live, feel free to say hello. Drop any questions or comments in the chat. I'm going to give a really quick update on Express Entry because there was a draw this week. Then I'm going to get into a insightful conversation with Rebecca talking about relocating to Canada, what that process is like, how COVID has affected it throughout the year, what we can expect and maybe prepare for into 2021. So I'm really excited for that. Really quickly, we did have an Express Entry draw this week. I was unsure on actually whether it was going to happen because some years IRCC has kind of skipped them around the holidays. This year they did not, which I think is a good sign. But the score requirement for this past draw was 468. It was also another draw where IRCC invited 5,000 people to apply. This is a record number draw in terms of the volume of people that they've invited to apply. And the score 468 is actually the lowest of 2020. So what does this mean? I think it's a really good sign whether you're inside or outside of Canada. If you are planning to get PR or trying to get PR, I think it's a really good sign because number one, IRCC is doing big draws. They're inviting a lot of people to apply. Number two, that means that score is slowly going to come down. So really good news heading into 2021. I will leave more of the immigration chat for the Visto Facebook group and the Visto portal. Make sure you've joined if you haven't signed up already for free at visto.ai. Let's get into the fun stuff. Rebecca, thank you again for joining me. Can you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and your background before we kind of get into the topics of today?
Sure, absolutely. So myself, hi everyone, my name is Rebecca and my partner, Christina. We launched My Relo Solution about a year and a half ago, but really got into the drive this year, of course, because Canada, of course, is inviting a lot of new immigrants and possibly, skilled workers, LMIAs, like a lot of different people to come to Canada and join us. That's fantastic because I used exactly the same system when I immigrated from Germany to Canada. So I came to Canada about 11 years ago and I came over the skilled worker program. So I had to go through all the systems as you, and I think I remember it took about 2 years before we even, kind of had the opportunity just to help the paper, the important visa. You got the invitation, you're so excited. And then you have that 1 year where you have to kind of make that transition. So being in the process, of course, we learned a lot of steps, Christina and she used a different program at the time. She came with a family program, what is, of course, an opportunity as well because she had her husband here in Canada. But in the steps, I learned how to settle down here in Canada. And my background is in the hospitality industry as well as corporate housing. And I made my way from Germany in that industry to Canada at that time through the skilled worker program, as I mentioned, and also then settled here in Ottawa on the east side of Canada. And I made my way through different companies and learned a lot how we can actually help and navigate newcomers here to Canada. And we realized quickly that there is a lot of need and a lot of miscommunication, unfortunately. So I just want to, with Josh today, I just want to talk a little bit about what is important, which things do you have to think about even coming here after you settle your information with the visa, because visa is one part, but then also settling down here in Canada, that's a whole different story, but it's most of the time forgotten. Most people don't think about that much in detail. Unfortunately, they're so busy with just getting the visa and coming here. But that part, you really have to think about it because we want to make sure that you don't do all the silly mistakes we have done, and that's very costly.
Absolutely.
unfortunately.
You can almost think of it as two big blocks, right? The first one being immigration. I mean, you need it, otherwise you can't come to begin with. But once you get that approval, there's still a big second step there, which is to actually lift up and move your entire life to a new country. I've never done it, so I can't really speak from experience, but I'm definitely interested to hear more about it from your perspective. I'll also say for anybody who's tuning in, if you do have questions for Rebecca, feel free to throw them in the chat or even just say hello, and I'll make sure to, what we want to do is answer them all live. But firstly, Rebecca, I want to ask, when you did your move 11 years ago, what were some of those things that stood out for you that were kind of surprising and very difficult? You know, those things that you didn't realize, you maybe didn't prepare for. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things where we really, with my Velo solution, we really wanted to cover these topics because that was one of the pressing points we had. And if we would have had, and with my husband, I talk about this even now all the time, if we would have had that, and at this time would something exist, something like that, we would have used it in a heartbeat. But 10 years ago, the system was also different. So when we came, all these programs that existed were just governed by the government. So there was unfortunately, not so much information. When we landed in Toronto at the airport, they gave you pamphlets, and here we go. So there was no transitioning, there was no reaching out, there was no planning ahead. We got lucky because my husband and I, we immigrated into the US before. So we had the experience with the US, we traveled before to Canada, we know the process in North America, we had the American experience and then the Canadian. So there was a little bit of help in that. But when we first started, we thought about, okay, so we have, in Munich, where we lived at the time, we had an apartment. So is it really worth it to take all the furniture with you? Does it make sense to actually pay for a container? Does it make sense to bring your furniture? Because you might not even know where you're ending up. Does the furniture fit? Is it really required? So you have to think about, does it really make sense to bring your belongings? Maybe sell it off because you can get something furnished here or unfurnished. So that's the accommodation. You really have to start at least 2 or 3 months before, really to think about it. Where are you going? Where do you want to live? Do you might want to start small? Because in some areas it's really expensive, as in especially Vancouver and Toronto. If you want to get a house, if you want to move into a house, or you're used to a certain lifestyle, you might not be able to get that right away because you don't have the credit history, you don't have all that knowledge. So that's one part, the accommodation. That's really, really important to figure out furniture, containers, all that jazz. How you're gonna land here and where you're gonna stay, because the downtowns are really expensive too. And then also another part is very important, documents. So we're specializing on documents. So in the process, when you get your visas, you have, of course, different translations. You want to make sure that you have all the required papers if you have been to the university and all that. But most people forget that you need other papers to save money afterwards. That starts with medical records, school records, driver license records, translation records you can get already in your home country, so you don't have to go back or here to pay double the prices as you would have paid in your home country. Another big part is also, because you're living then in Canada, you're reaching out to a whole different level of government again. So you think about the time differences, you have to prove that you live here. They might gonna take longer because you have to prove that this is your record. So there's a lot of things you can plan ahead before you even come here as well. Another topic we also say, it's about the banking, making sure that you have the banking in place, that you have enough funds, because we tried to keep a lot of funds also in Europe at the time, but it's actually not beneficial if you want to come here, because you need a lot of first equipment, like buying things, groceries. They might be more expensive as you're used to it. Canada, in that perspective, because that country is so massive, there is not such as you're just going across the street and get your groceries, your bakery, your Metzger. It's not that easy. Like, you have to really think and plan ahead, and distance. It's a huge part. You have to think about it. Can I go there with public transportation, or do I need to get a car? Should I get, there's a lot of moving parts. So Christina and I, we specializing in educating people, as well as making sure that when they start working with us, we're getting all these documents based on your needs. And unfortunately, as much as I would love to say, okay, this is all what you need, but each case is different. And Josh, you might agree with this, each visa has specific working flows. So we really look deep with you. We do the consultation. We make sure that we base it on your needs. And then from there, we take you and guide you to all the processes you need to do. And please, one of the things, it's when you're planning ahead in COVID, we have seen it in the last couple of months, everything takes triple the time. If you think you can do it in a week or two, no, you cannot. Offices are still closed. There is not enough staff on site because they're all working maybe from home, so you have to organize Zoom calls. The association or the companies are not equipped yet for everything, so everything takes a little bit longer. And currently you have in Canada to isolate for 14 days, and you cannot break that. If you do, and I say that very clearly, it's a fine of $750,000. So it's not cheap. So that ticket, so please really think about it when you come, make sure. So what we have done is, in the past, just quickly, we actually work with the clients 2 months before, and then in that 14 days, we're organizing the appointments so that when you're staying in that accommodation where you have to stay put with your children or yourself, in that time, we're organizing with you already appointments over Zoom, over whatever has to be done. And so when you get out of the 14 days, you can go already to the bank. You can go to all the, driver license or whatever you have to do. So you're pretty much in a transition already for about 2-3 months. If you do not do that, if you don't prepare, usually it will take you about 6 months to 1 year. So we're really saving you a lot of time and money. We calculated it and how we're going to make a difference. You can pretty much, and unfortunately we did all the silly mistakes. We kind of calculated, you can save up to almost $60,000 if you can just make sure that you have the preparations when you come to Canada. So please, my recommendation, please don't stop in a moment for the visa. Just really try to plan ahead as much as you can in every single detail.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about timing, Rebecca, because it sounds like so many important things, so many difficult decisions. You were talking about moving, and do you sell furniture? Do you buy new? Do you ship it all? Unfortunately, there's a bit of a catch-22 as well, where you're in this limbo at one point where you're waiting for Immigration Canada, right? So you're probably, you don't want to pull the trigger on an apartment, on a house, on a condo, whatever. But at the same time, these are things that can take weeks and months to prepare before you can actually move. So when do you recommend people start doing this? Should they be preparing some of these things while they're still in processing? Are there certain things they can get done while they're in processing, certain things they should wait until they are guaranteed 100% they have their approval document, whether it's, study permit, PR, work permit, etc.? What do you recommend with regards to that and timing?
So first of all, I would start, as I said, collecting papers. That's the first thing. Collecting all translation papers or all papers you can use towards your stay or coming to Canada. So that's part one. You might not want to think about selling everything right away because you're waiting in the process. You're not clear yet what to do. But getting quotes, think about ahead. So when I come with a family of 4, okay, 2 adults, 2 children. So what do your children really need when they come to Canada? What do I need? What are my expectations? So list down what you have in your home country and then make the calculation. Go on Google and search like how much is furniture, how much is a bed on, let's say, simple way, IKEA. Okay, simple way. Go to IKEA and figure out how much do I need to spend for a mattress, how much you need to spend for a bed. The clothes, of course, you're going to bring with you, but how much would it cost me? So when I and Patrick at the time came, we calculated about $3,000 as a reference shopping at IKEA because we had nothing. You had to get everything from a plate to a cup to knives to everything. Is it, and when you calculate your needs as a family, then you know, is it worth it to pay for a container? Right. How much can you make with the things you sell in your home country? Is it maybe worth it to sell that, not ship it here, but take that money you just sold and invest it actually in Canada, so you don't have to ship, so you get new things, you can put furniture based on your needs, because as I mentioned before, you may not be able to get exactly that what you're used to it, because it takes time to go in certain apartments. And unfortunately, there's two factors as well I want to mention. If you come in the summertime, everybody comes in the summertime because it's nice, it's pretty, but you know what? Coming in the summertime, it's very expensive because demand, and demand is huge. So if you come more in the spring and the fall, your chances are getting better options, more options, and maybe even less prices. So think about the time frames as well. Yes, of course, you have to think about it's cold in Canada. So the travel here in Canada happens, and that's my previous work experience, happens in the summer. So everybody's traveling in the summer. So of course, you're competing with a lot more people and with a lot more companies, because everybody, also the companies, are bringing their people in the summer, spring till summer. So usually from April, May to the roughly September, October, everybody brings everybody here in Canada because that's the travel time. That's when travel is happening the most. So if you can avoid that, think about it. There's more options, but the services will be the same, it's just different options. So you have more to go on, and that's with everything you can think of. You really just think about what you can do over there, and then equal it off what you have to get here. And this is the same also with medical insurance. So the government of Canada, as an example, when you come with a PR, you have to wait for 2 months, and sometimes 3, depending on the province. You have to wait before actually getting OHIP in this case. But since COVID, government actually cut that waiting time. So you have the standard health insurance, but there is no dental in there. There is no medication in that. And you also have to think about that any other things that may happen to you, and nobody can tell you with children or with whoever, this is not covered. So you might want to think about getting health insurance and additional health insurance before you get, let's say, before you get a job, where jobs are offering these health packages. So companies offering health packages where you can actually then top up your needs, right? As a family, as a dentist. I always say the dentist is one of the things what's very important. And then also your medication, prepare. If you have a specific condition and you do not have the health insurance yet with an employer when you get a job, you really want to think about stocking up before you come here, because that's very expensive. Medical is very expensive. Medicine, it's not as expensive as in the US, but it's a big topic item. So you want to think about in Canada, if you do not have medical insurance, and Christina had that because she came with her family, you think about $500 a month.
Cool. That's good.
If you have any medical things, if you have to go with the children, it adds up per person. It really adds up. So planning ahead in that matter, you want to make sure that there's all things, and this goes on with the banking. Make sure that you do all your resources there. How can I transfer money to Canada in an effective way? How can I make sure that I get, the bankings that they may connect, that I can transfer easily money, what resources are there. But we are working with a lot of professionals. We have the tools for that. So we can point you in the right directions, not to lose a lot of money while doing the transfers, and then building also with the banking industry, building your credit history. But that's another big topic, building your credit history in Canada. That's very important. And then of course the permanent housing. So we recommend that you start looking for a transitional period of 3 months in a temporary housing, because you're going to collect most of the parts, most of the documents, and it is required and mandatory that you not move during that time, because all government papers will come to that address. If you do move in that time, they cannot deliver your health card, your SIN, social insurance number. You cannot get these documents. And it's very stressful and a lot of work to get that ball rolling, because you have to communicate with the government, and we're still in COVID-19. So there's not a lot of people happening. It's not a lot of happening very fast. Yeah. So you really want to make sure that in COVID time you stay put for that roughly 3 months. And after that, we kind of help you to settle into permanent housing. But please don't be shocked. As an example, here in Ottawa, if you're looking for a 1-bedroom apartment in the furnished housing, you're looking between $2,000, $2,800 a month. But this is furnished. So everything is included, from hydro, water, TV, internet, and all that jazz. So keep that in mind, whatever direction you go. If you then go into the unfurnished accommodation later on, you have to pay for water, for hydro, you have to get a tenant insurance, you have to make sure you have electricity, all the setup with internet. And coming from Europe, internet and phone is very cheap compared to Canada. So when you come here, most of the people have to start with a contract in the phone, and it can cost you up to $100 a month. So when I compare it to where I come from, I paid $10 and I had everything included, internet and this. But here it can rate you up to $100. Depends on which provider you're searching for, in which area you're living in too. So you really have to think about a lot of steps. That's why we recommend half a year, and then the deep drive when you think about, okay, let's move, let's do all this. That's about a month, 2 months. We recommend 2 months. Then you start working with us, because then we know you're coming. We can prepare you to settle, and then make sure that you're pretty much set up within the 2 to 3 months with all your paperwork. Most of people who come, they need about six months till 1 year, and that will also have a huge impact on your resources for jobs, because your main priority when you come here to Canada, you should be prepared for your resumes, going out and finding jobs, and making sure that you can support your family.
Absolutely.
If you can. So there's a lot of trigger effects afterwards. So you really want to make sure that you kind of, prepare as much as you can.
Yeah, there's so many important elements as you kind of described, right? So many of these big kind of like pillar items. I wanted to ask a little bit from the employer side, or the employer's perspective, and we have a great question from Shrikant from the chat. If anybody else has questions, feel free to throw them in. But Shrikant is asking, can you talk a little bit about the intra-company transfer, so the work permit transfer process timeline, and how COVID has impacted that? Now, Shrikant, the processing time of the work permit is one thing. All processing from Immigration Canada has been delayed, and IRCC has given us some instructions basically to expect delays on everything. But Rebecca, can you talk a little bit about, are you seeing companies transfer people in from outside of the country? What is that process looking like? How has it been affected, either from a time perspective and also from a process perspective, right? Because of COVID. Yeah. I think it's a great question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a valid question. So there's different factors. One of them is the visa statuses, and then the approval, the passports, the the biometric
Mm-hmm.
fingerprints, all this has to be fall into place. Then also a big process currently is the shutdowns. So depending on each province, unfortunately, it all depends. Ontario at the moment is good, but we're shutting down on the 26th. Alberta was already a month before because they had so many cases. And then also it depends on which country are you coming from.
Mm-hmm.
There's things happening as the UK. Remember, let's just a few days ago, the UK had a specific stream of the new coronavirus. So the government just declared within 24 hours, we are not allowing anybody from the UK for 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they extended it again. So pretty much for a week, if you would have tried from a perspective of a company, it's a complete unforeseen circumstance. So if even you were planned to come and arrive here in Canada from the UK, you can't. As long as the government doesn't let anybody in and has regulations, and then these people have to isolate, and you have to prove that you're isolating too. So unforeseen things happen. So it depends on what's going on between the governments. So we're trying to keep track, we're trying to inform as good as possible. The company itself, if they I heard they usually start a year in advance. They're connecting with us. They're saying, okay, we have a transferee coming, let's say in the summer of 2021. They start around, a year, 9 months, something like this in that time frame. Then they say, okay, we are planning on this. Then they're starting all the collection, the papers. Then we're getting them settled in. Then we're making sure they have housing. Then making sure that we have all this. But even if we organize the housing, we tell them that the papers are not going to be signed before it's official. That means a month before, we're going to go back to the let's say the accommodation, because that's the most topic for everybody. A month before, usually we kind of confirm. We just ask for it, we get pricing, and we put a hold on it. But
Mm-hmm.
we are not confirming, because in 1 month you kind of can look ahead what's happening, except that particular case when the government shuts down.
Right.
So, and then we are hoping for the best. So we are coordinating with them, we are coordinating with the client, with the companies, and with whoever is involved. We are coordinating that this person is coming later or earlier, or things change, has to, like sometimes they get even sick beforehand. So you have to prove that you're COVID free, and then possibly they got affected. So we have another 14 days where they have to stay put in their home country, and then they're coming. So it was so much easier many years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before COVID, but now there's so many factors, and we're really hoping that whenever you decide to come, that you start as early as possible to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most, whatever you do, just really try to reach out. Everything else can be fixed, can be organized. It's just a matter of timing. And if you're too late in the process, you might be left with the things what you had at the time. If you plan a little bit more ahead, you just have way more options, and we can give you other opportunities to consider other options. But if you ask me, we had a client coming from the Middle East. He contacted us 3 days before he came to the country, and then he was here. Of course, it's gonna take longer. Everything is gonna take a long time, and it's just so much more on them. And then they did a lot of mistakes because they tried to help themselves, not
Mm-hmm.
with us guiding, unfortunately, even though they hired us. So he tried to get faster, but actually he did more mistakes in the process, as if he would have just waited with us for another week or two. So he he then, after two mistakes we were able to fix, he kind of understood why, you have to like you have to plan, you have to make sure that you're taking the right steps. And also it's a cultural thing as well. And I have to say that because you're of course highly motivated. Everybody is highly motivated coming to this country because they want to start a new life and improve their life. But things take time. You have to slow down. You have to really think about your next steps. Don't do anything rational, because you're rushing into things. You might not know what the end consequence will be. So take your time, take it before and take it after, and think about it, where your next steps are, because that can put you in good or in bad situations. That's
Absolutely.
pretty much my most worry for all of that.
Yeah, and it's very similar with immigration too, where I always say, if whether you're using Visto or me or somebody else, don't wait 3 days before your permit's going to expire before looking into extending it and stuff like that. Shrikant, hopefully that was helpful. He says U.S. to Vancouver, BC. So you probably won't run into those travel issues, which is good. And Shrikant, if you have any other follow-up questions, or if anybody else has any follow-up questions, definitely throw them in the chat. I have one last one for you, Rebecca. What are 2 or 3 things you would highlight for prospective immigrants? Maybe they're in processing right now, or they've received their approval, or they're just starting the application process. What are the 2 or 3 things you would really highlight that they should focus on, or maybe like the 2 or 3 biggest mistakes that you see people make? Obviously, check out My Relo Solution, and we'll talk about where you can find them in just a second. But other than, of course, working directly with you, what are maybe 2 or 3 big topic items that people should be aware of before making the move to Canada?
Whew, there's so many.
Just 2 or 3.
2 or 3. The biggest mistakes. Think. Take your time. Don't rush into anything. As in every single country, there's good people and there's bad people, and there's good companies and bad companies. So research. Do a lot of research and connect with especially companies and people who have an accreditation, such as Josh and we have. Make sure, whoever you choose, that you make sure that you connect with them, that you ask them questions. You can ask anything about, how their work is, what they do, how much they charge for things. Just make sure, or connect with them and ask your questions. And there is no bad question. There is no silly question. There is no, there is not enough information you can collect before coming to Canada. That's number 1. Number 2, make sure that you have your papers in check, that you have them all collected, because going back later, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's going to cost you a lot of time to collect them. Another, the third part for me personally is that get prepared for the jobs here in Canada. The whole system works completely different. As an example, when I came from Germany, highly motivated in my mid-20s, I had power, I had energy. I'm like, let's go, let's move it. But you know what? My culture, how we do things, are completely different to what Canadians do. And also it depends on in which city are you immigrating to actually. So as an example, Ottawa, it's a little bit more, it's more tech, and it's a lot of government driven and association driven. So these people have a completely different working energy when they approach things. When I moved first to Toronto, high pace, everything goes fast, and it has to be, like ding, 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 ding. But when you move to a different part of the country, things might go faster, or slower. So you have to research how are each city, how are the employment, and then also think about when you come to Canada right now, what are the jobs who are in demand? What is the city known to? Is it tech? Is it government? Is it healthcare? Is it just working as an Uber driver, like to get started? Like your expectations need to be in check with that, what's available. So currently, and Josh, we can talk about this a little bit more in depth, but currently we all over the world, a lot of people lost their jobs due to COVID-19. So there is already a lot demand and a lot of other people who have maybe already have the experience here in Canada, the working experience. You're gonna be in competition with them when you come to Canada. So you might not be able to start in the position you had in your previous company or in your previous work experience. But what you have to do is maybe start lower. But then due to your work experience, you're gonna knock them out because you will show them how professional you are. And you might be in that job for 6 months or 1 year, but they're gonna see you're on time, you're motivated, you take responsibility. It's a whole different level, and you move quicker and faster in the ranks here in Canada when you kind of prove to them, and it calls Canadian work experience. So just keep it in mind that maybe your expectations are a little bit too high, and you might want to look also for jobs, entry-level jobs at the time when you come here, because your chances are higher to be hired at that time. And even though I know it may suck, because I had a manager position before, and I started on a low entry level, but you know what? I got promoted within a year and I ended up as a manager again, but I needed that Canadian work experience because you need to work alongside with these employees or with your boss, but they don't function like you're at home. They function completely different. And I had to learn that too, and I'm still learning.
Absolutely.
Like it's a battle, like it's a happy medium. So drive is very important when you come to a new country. Like you need to drive to make this happen, but don't be upset or think that you fail just because you're starting in a lower entry position. But I promise you, if you can make this happen, if you can stick to it, and if you can kind of, go through the ranks, you're gonna be good again. You're gonna make it, but it's not gonna happen within the first 3 months.
Absolutely. And that's a great answer. Quickly to summarize the 3 points is, number one, you're going to have to put some extra time and energy and research into the job stuff. Super important. Your second point was have all those extra documents ready ahead of time. Another great point. And the first one I can probably relate to the most, which is be careful with the service providers you're working with. We have a blog post that outlines the common scams that are, happen either in Canada or companies that are abroad selling services to help you come to Canada. The amount of users that we've had sign up or people that have talked to me that have been scammed it's very disappointing at how many that is. So be very careful. We have a quick Shrikant is asking, what are the work permit processing times if they start in January? Shrikant, I'll send you a link. You can check the average processing times depending on the type of permit and depending on where you're applying from on the IRCC website. That's the best place to find it. I will throw that in the chat right after I ask Rebecca her next question. So Rebecca, actually my last question for you is, first of all, again, thank you very much for taking time on Christmas Day here in North America to chat with us. If people are interested in working with you or learning more about you or getting in touch, where do you recommend that they go?
They would go to our webpage. It's www.myrelosolution.com. We're of course on all social media. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on LinkedIn, on YouTube and Instagram. We do have also, as Josh, we're working hand in hand. So the visa goes with the settlement, the relocation goes in hand in hand. So we do have also webinars. We just talked about that before, actually, before we went to the call, to just get you kind of thinking about the settlement part of that when you come here to Canada. So we do have also information about that on our webpage. And please feel free and get in touch with us. There's email, there's a live chat. If you want to have, or if you have any questions about that, get in touch with me or with Christina. She's located on the West Coast. So we divided it East and West Coast because it's a lot of area to cover. So we are specialized in these two fields. And you can actually just connect with us, ask questions away. If you have any, we can help you with situations. And if we cannot, we'll put you in the right direction with the right partners we have in place.
Awesome. And what I'm going to do is, once this video comes down from being live, once we end it, I will make sure that the links to Rebecca, to your website, will be in the description, either on YouTube or on Facebook. We're streaming to both right now. My Relo solution is also in the Visto portal. So if you sign up for free at visto.ai to use our free immigration platform, it'll help you learn about express entry, work permits, study permits, startup visa, almost everything under the sun. If you click on the Settlement Services tab, you'll actually find a direct link right there to their services as well. We're very happy to be partnered. Rebecca, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the audience. And once again, happy holidays and Merry Christmas. And thanks for joining us today. It was
awesome.
Amazing.
And Joan says, Merry Christmas, Josh and Rebecca. Thanks for your time. Great discussion. And to you, Rebecca, tips shared are awesome. Thanks again. Joan, thanks very much. To everybody else who tuned in, we really appreciate it. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. A early Happy New Year. Rebecca, thanks again. And everybody have a great rest of your Friday.